Chris Jericho, the man with the list, Y2J, a suit-wearing, self-centered, egotistical man. He's had quite the career and it's yet to conclude. As a matter of fact, this man is ripped again. Where does his current influencer run lead to? It's anybody's question, but right now, we're here to talk about the Save Us Y2J era. The era where he was promising to save the fans from men like Randy Orton, but lost himself into his own selfishness and ego, which led to Chris turning his back on the very same people that he promised change to. In his mind, he was this hero who was going to conquer these villains and bring forth change. However, this did not go to plan. I should also note, this video in particular is not about the HBK feud. I'm just talking about Jericho's beginnings. The HBK feud would be in a separate video. With that said, Chris Jericho up to 2007 had a good career. It was full of accolades, classic matches, and feuds. And yes, it might be great, but I'm just talking about that like Hall of Fame headliner type career. If he were to have actually retired in 2005, he would have been praised endlessly, but not on the level that he is today. Even then, some people think he should let go before he becomes Ric Flair. But anyways, let's go back to this time period. So around here, Jericho had enough of wrestling. Not in the sense of I hate this thing, but in the sense of I'm exhausted, I want to spend time with my family. Even then, Jericho put over John Cena on his way out and had an embarrassing exit that was his idea. In his time away, Chris Jericho focused on Fozzy, and it wasn't like he was entirely out of wrestling. Every once in a while, he'd appear on WWE.com to answer a few questions, speak about wrestling in interviews, and even teased appearing with TNA. I couldn't find the video, but they showed this clip of him with his back to the camera. And you know, mid-2000s internet, they always make up these lies with the copy and paste Photoshop stuff. But regardless, Jericho at face value looked like he was flirting with TNA. Rumblings from the Torch and the Wrestling Observer claimed that TNA were very interested in bringing in Jericho, but the word is that regardless, he was going to WWE. There wasn't much reporting on that until January of 2007. Since Y2J was a troll, he added fuel to the fire in an interview with TNAWrestling.com. Y2J was asked if he does return, would it be in a 4-sided ring or a 6-sided ring? He said, I've actually been working on a 5-sided design for the Rhomboid Wrestling Federation that I think is going to take off like gangbusters. Besides that, there ain't never been a 4-sided ring that could contain Jericho. Nobody knew if negotiations were heating up, but at the end of the day, Jericho did not close the door on a TNA deal. At the same time, he was trying to get a feel for things, so he started taking autograph signings to know if the fans want him back. After seeing a bunch of old-timers, Jericho had an epiphany. He was 36 and was doing these signings like he retired. Add to that, John Cena and Shawn Michaels had that classic match on Raw in London that motivated Jericho to get off his couch, drop his guitar, and put his wrestling gear on. He didn't do it outright, but it was the beginning. Suddenly he began speaking to Chris Benoit more, and he was very supportive of a return, saying, quote, the business misses you. The fans miss you. The locker room misses you. I miss you. I think you should come back. He was excited to train him, but then, you know what happened. After all of this, Dixie Carter still wanted to meet with Jericho, whose intentions were still to return to WWE. Y2J used this to his advantage and leaked out that he had a meeting. On September 5, 2007, Pro Wrestling Torch reported, Chris Jericho received a large, presumably 7-figure monetary offer to return to World Wrestling Entertainment. WWE has expressed interest in bringing Jericho back for a while. The two parties have communicated regularly over the past several months, and Jericho, who walked away from professional wrestling in 2005, is now reportedly fully willing to return to wrestling. A source close to the wrestler says that Jericho recognizes that his Hollywood aspirations are not going to provide a short-term monetary reward anywhere near that of WWE's offer. At this point, Jericho's return merely hinges on the two parties reaching a workable arrangement. Once the two sides agree on terms, and it is unknown how long that will take to happen, it could be as short as a few weeks to as long as many months, Jericho is expected to rejoin the WWE roster. I assume this is when the TNA rumor flew around. Jericho just wanted a little leverage so WWE could meet his demands, and they did, meaning Y2J was back on the WWE roster. For the creative process of his return, Jericho said, I wanted to make my return to the WWE as unique and impactful as my debut was 8 years earlier. I didn't want to repeat the countdown clock again, so I was looking for something a little more cryptic. Then the idea struck to use the phrase second coming, while incorporating the black and green binary codes I'd seen while watching The Matrix a few nights earlier. I flew to WWE headquarters in Stamford to meet with Vince and Bryan and pitched them my concept. My idea was a 4-week run of vignettes that would begin with the binary codes filling the screen with computer-generated 2s. In the second week, all but one of the 2s would disappear. And then in the third week, the 2 would grow to the size of the screen and morph into the words, second coming. I would show up on the 4th week and make my grand return. Vince listened to my ideas, nodded, and agreed to the concept in about 2 minutes. His only caveat was that he wanted the vignettes to run for more than 4 weeks. And when did these vignettes pop up? September 25th, 2007. The first vignette in itself had this grandiose feeling to it. Also, by the sounds of it, it sounded like they were doing business during the vignette. And since this was the internet, they found out who it was. At face value, it of course gives off the Y2J vibe, but they found some tiny ass stuff such as CD Volume 4 1.act. What does that mean? It meant Volume 4, Track 1, and would you look at that? More clues continued as the weeks went by, and Jericho continued denying he was behind these vignettes, claiming he never even saw them. Fans continued speculating where Jericho's debut was, and some even believed that it would occur at No Mercy. During the show, the Chicago fans repeatedly chanted for Jericho, to which McMahon responded, "I'm not gonna give you that." They chanted it a few minutes later, and he went nuts. At this point, it was the worst kept secret. Jericho's book signing locations were always coinciding where WWE was at the time as well. In other places, he struggled with regaining his old form, and he said that when his body landed on the wrestling mat, it felt extremely painful and he had to adapt. At the same time, he wanted a new finisher, something that he could do at a moment's notice, and so he's inspired to do an Unported-esque move. The problem was, Candice Michelle performed this very same move, so he was inspired to do the Code Breaker. And when asked straight up about returning on the hour, he said, "It's coming."
You're coming back, aren't you?
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation, but eventually I'll be back.
Earlier that week on Raw, the code was exposed. X plus 1 equaled Y, and 9 plus 1 equaled J. Around here, the rumors were not denied, and WWE seemed to give up. Like Jericho, he basically admitted, "I'm coming back." He just didn't say when. But on WWE's case, they basically exposed when, because on November 13th, 2007, the holiday issue of WWE Magazine leaked, and the man himself, Y2J, was on the front cover. In the magazine, Jericho was asked, "How are you going to top your previous self?" He responded saying, "That's like asking Axl Rose to top Appetite for Destruction. He can't. All he could do is get Chinese Democracy done and make it as good as he can. If you're obsessed with topping your past work, it ain't gonna happen." Chinese Democracy may have not been the iconic highlight for Guns N' Roses, but the best for Chris Jericho is certainly yet to come. On the November 19th, 2007 episode of Raw, hot off the heels of Survivor Series, the WWE Champion Randy Orton wanted to celebrate his title victory at Survivor Series in grand fashion. He wanted to commemorate this victory. So he thought a torch runner was necessary for this occasion. He was running from Miami all the way to Fort Lauderdale, and he had been hyping him up throughout the night. And unless Rikishi ran him over and did it for The Rock, he was expected to arrive to the arena before the end of the show. In anticipation, Randy Orton RKO'd several wrestlers throughout the show. He came out at the end and said that he'd be in all that there is to beat, and there's the torch runner. He's excited. He's got a smile on his face, but then he took a damn clothesline. Douche move. But the crowd doesn't care because they just seen a familiar face, or back in this case. The code is solved and there's a countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pyro, and there's Chris Jericho. After over 2 years, he was finally back, and his departure at face value feels like it was 4 years earlier, but it was only 2. Since then, a lot happened in the wrestling world, but the fans didn't forget about Y2J. Jericho himself didn't expect this type of reception, feeling that since the crowd had been scenified, the kids wouldn't recognize him. By the sounds of it, he was definitely wrong. Orton, the man whose ceremony was pissed on and thrown to the trash, was utterly livid. The returning Y2J welcomed everyone to Raw as Jericho, and it didn't feel like he changed much. He brought us some of that classic Y2J energy, leading to Randy Orton saying it's a blessing that he didn't stay because he would have kicked his head off. Then he asked the returning hero, "What are you saving us from?" So he responded saying he's saving the fans from Orton's boring personality, his frying pan of a head, his voice, all kinds of things, but most importantly, he was back to save the fans from Orton himself. Jericho promised to take that title away, and when he does, Raw, WWE, the universe itself will never ever be the same again. The fans played along and it was an exciting moment. Jericho didn't lose a step in the promo department. Of course, you can't be expecting him to cut an iconic promo in his first night. He made some bizarre references like Blue Ball Magazine, but the crowd reacted well to everything. They shouted never louder than I would if asked about an Edge and Matt Hardy video. But despite this, Chris himself wasn't as positively receptive to his return promo, feeling that it was outdated. It felt like a greatest hits-esque type of thing, but I can't say it was wrong of him to do, Fans remember Y2J, the guy that always used to crack jokes, make fun of people, and they were accepting of seeing him all in his glory like it was 2000. And I will say this, you can say he looked like Gordon Ramsay, Neil Patrick Harris, but at the end of the day, he was a welcoming return. The star power around the end of 2007 was somewhat recovering, and after the likes of John Cena and Bobby Lashley were away, Chris Jericho was needed. From his perspective, it looked like a great opportunity to slot into the main event role and possibly win the title. He had teased this in a few interviews in the past, however, things didn't go the way he intended to. The following week on Raw, he tried to make an attempt to simplify what he wanted to Randy Orton. Me want title match. Honestly, it sounds like something he would have done in the past. Santino then interrupted and started calling him KYJ, and he said that Jericho looked like a bum who bypassed security looking like Lindsay Lohan with that haircut. Jericho wasn't aware of who he was, sarcastically, and he started mispronouncing his name, Sandusky, Santoki, or whatever, and he got to the point where he lost it. Morrell was so frustrated that he confidently said that he could beat Y2J, leading to an impromptu match. This turned out to be a showcase match for Jericho. Santino did put up a fight, but there was no way he was losing. He had the new return boost. He hit the code breaker for the very first time to win it. Later that night, he provided a slight distraction, leading to Orton losing his match to Ric Flair. Now, Y2J's interaction with Santino kind of affected him. He understood that he couldn't get a title shot by using some random pictures, so that's why he cost him his match with Ric Flair. Apparently, he got a text message from WWE.com confirming the match, and this was after Randy Orton accepted the match, so it was official. He was more than confident of his chances, but before he could finish, the WWE Champion interrupted. Orton did not see things the way Jericho did, not at all. He accepted the challenge because it provided him an EC match, but the challenger, though, refused to allow Randy to see him as a mere stepping stone. Unlike his opponent, he did his homework. Orton was the most dastardly, conniving wrestler in the entire WWE, and Jericho was more than well aware of this. Despite this, Orton felt confident that he could drop Y2J without breaking a sweat. Since the pay-per-view would be ruined, William Regal put a stop to this and gave each man the chance to choose the other's opponent. Jericho received the noble honor of facing Umaga, whereas Orton earned the right to face Shawn Michaels once again. As you possibly know, Orton was pushed to the very limit facing the Heartbreak Kid at Survivor Series. It took a minuscule mistake that was costly for Orton to retain the title. With that said, the Legend Killer showed his true colors, intruding on Jericho's match and hitting him with that devastating RKO. This attack definitely did not go unnoticed, and by night's end, Chris returned the favor. It had been a while since that other side was unleashed, and obviously that had to do with a damn hiatus, but still. In his pursuit of championship gold, Chris Jericho ran into a familiar friend turned foe, Eric Bischoff. After giving a false prophecy on reinventing this business again, the man of 1,004 holds interrupted, and looking back, this moment is a blur. I remember this episode, I remember watching this moment, but at times it feels out of place. I don't know. He acknowledged how Bischoff got rid of him, and it was a blessing in disguise. It led to that passion returning. He also promised to win the title. Bischoff laughed it off and talked about the Save Us slogan, and he said that Jericho should save these fans $40 by forfeiting the match because he was going to lose anyways. He started roasting him and threatening Bischoff scratched that assault him, and before anything could go down, Randy Orton made the save and instead took the walls himself. Y2J chants intensify as he stares deeply into the title that he never won. Well, technically. Now, throughout the build, they made you believe that there was a chance that Chris Jericho would recapture the gold that eluded him for 5 years, and if you were like me at the time, you believed it. But it was the contrary. The match as a whole was not bad, rather solid, but the thing is, compared to almost every other match in the Age of Orton, it doesn't stand out. That said, the ending has to be the most surprising thing from the title reign. During the match, Randy Orton tossed Chris Jericho into the SmackDown announce table. JBL took the brunt of the fall and took a shove as well. He seemed to have taken this to heart, and meanwhile, Jericho was gaining momentum. He catches Orton and locks him in the walls. He's got the match won. Fans believe it at this point, but then JBL punts him in the face, and they were fuming. Orton added insult to injury afterwards. What this meant was Jericho was kicked out of the main event scene like it was Jazz from the Fresh Prince. It had been a quick run, but according to the Torch and the Wrestling Observer, not everyone was a fan of Y2J's return in promos. Chris Jericho's feud with Randy Orton looks to be a short one, as this should be over soon. He may move on to a War of Words feud with JBL, culminating in a match at WrestleMania. Some people within WWE are already disappointed with Jericho's mic work, in-ring work, and mild crowd reaction. Jericho was never expected to get a long period of grace, but the tide had turned against him fairly quickly. And another one from the Observer dated around December 6, 2007. At the November 19th Raw show, the night in which Chris Jericho returned, Triple H was joking with a number of the younger wrestlers about how they should be really excited for the next round of house shows. When asked why, he said that there would be nothing but sellouts now that the savior has arrived. He also said something similar to Shawn Michaels, telling him that he should work house shows again because Chris Jericho is back to save wrestling. Michaels didn't really respond to Triple H's comment, as he didn't laugh about it nor respond to it negatively. Of course, Triple H was being sarcastic with his comment. He was telling people that Ric Flair's return will make more money than Jericho's return, and internally, some people believe Triple H's comparison was counterproductive. It was also noted that he never does this sort of stuff at the arena to co-workers, but Jericho, of all people, got him to do it. If he does, it's only with the inner circle of WWE. On the other hand, Stephanie McMahon was given the impression at television that she is very supportive of Chris Jericho. Now, is all this true? I don't know, but at the end of the day, Jericho and the game didn't see eye to eye for a very long time, and that's something they have acknowledged in a couple of interviews in the past. As for JBL, WWE had been asking him to come back for quite some time. They teased his return throughout the year, having him take finishers from the likes of Batista, and he was starting to act tough and rude during interviews. The feud itself was initially supposed to conclude at WrestleMania, and this is something that Jericho himself acknowledged in his book. That said, a somewhat furious and damaged Chris Jericho came out to the ring the following night in order to address JBL's actions at Armageddon. He wanted answers then and there. Y2J, though, realized that JBL is not going to meet his demands, but before he could go to SmackDown, Bradshaw emerged via satellite. JBL made himself seem like an extremely busy person who has business to deal with, rather than mess with Chris Jericho. He acknowledged Y2J getting burned after touching him last night, but Mr. Save Us, though, saw it as childish and compared this to Mark Eaton taking a sweet chin music. And Bradshaw exploded, saying he shouldn't be mentioned in the same sentence as him, and Jericho promised to appear on SmackDown, but JBL shut him up, saying if he comes Friday night, Chris will not compete in the Royal Rumble. In an effort to reignite that fire within JBL, he told him, what happened to you? You're now being mentioned with the likes of Joey Styles and Michael Cole, and to Jericho, deep down inside, Bradshaw knows that he's irrelevant. A man that he used to be doesn't exist, and when he got the chance to respond, he brought some of that old JBL fury. He told Jericho that may God help him when he comes to Raw, and thus John Bradshaw Layfield's run as a commentator on SmackDown has come to an end. On the Tribute to the Troops show the following week, Y2J faced Randy Orton in a rematch. Once again, in the same situation, JBL comes in and provides a distraction long enough for Orton to bounce him with an RKO. For the first time in a while, JBL demonstrated some of his dangerous moveset, hitting the devastating clothesline from hell. With Mr. Stavros once again back to his natural state as he was in the past, that being taken else to main eventers, his momentum was gone like Carlito's push at the time. Thing is, when the fans first saw Y2J in all his glory returning to his old home, they were hyped, but only 4 weeks later, it's like he never left, and I don't mean that in a good way. For the first time ever, JBL made his Raw debut. Looking back, it's so weird seeing him on Monday nights, and obviously Bradshaw, the Tex and the APA version of JBL, was a Raw wrestler in the past, but his appearances as this businessman were only a handful. JBL, he proceeded to spend WWE's entire pyro budget just raising his hand in the air, and it's so damn tacky, but definitely on brand for JBL, who always treated himself as this grandiose individual. He proclaimed this day as a historic one. Why? Because JBL has come to Raw. Before it could give out a warning to everybody, Chris Jericho came out in a chaotic, bloody brawl ensued. So the feud was in full swing. I don't think anybody foresaw a program with these two, but on paper it had huge potential because both men knew how to talk, and they could sell you on a feud with their words. Whether it be Jericho roasting JBL or Bradshaw himself going on a random tirade about how Y2J saved nobody. Before the feud could intensify, scratch that, they got to the blood chapter rather quick. On the January 7, 2008 episode of Raw, the Raw Roulette episode, Y2J Chris Jericho was scheduled to face both Snitsky and JBL in a handicap match. Jericho for a little while withstood the onslaught, but then Bradshaw brought the weapons. They started choking him out, dragging him with a wire like he's a damn animal all the way up to the stage, where he tied him up for no reason, other than to prove a point, of course. The attack to JBL was symbolic. He took it as an attack to the fans, talking about how he's gonna save them. And he made it personal, asking to talk to Jericho's kids. Come to think about it, I actually forgot this feud started because JBL was pushed away. He wanted Jericho to tell his kids that he's given up and that he's a coward. This also came with a warning, as JBL instructed Chris not to come to the Royal Rumble. Instead of saving the fans, he's gonna need someone to save him. Oh, and there's the pyro. Wait, there's more and more. Bro, we get it, you're rich, you're soaked in money. Oh my god, 5 times! How much pyro does one man need? With that said, Jericho was missing from Raw that night, but he certainly wasn't the following week. Y2J knew very well that JBL wasn't here and thought that the coward statement was ironic. The moment where he was choked out with the cord was something that Jericho had never experienced, but despite this, he was here. Sunday was going to be a fight, and Jericho didn't have to shout, but at the end of the day, he was laser focused on one task, and that was to eradicate JBL. About the match itself, decent, nothing noteworthy, and if anything, the one thing that was noteworthy wasn't the action itself. JBL's intelligence came into play here. Y2J though showed resiliency and determination, even if there was blood on his face. Then he botched a bulldog and the fans booed, and this is edited from the network, I should note. For some reason it's not on there. They chanted, "You effed up," according to Jericho in his book, and there was too much fury coming from him to allow this to continue, so it ended in a DQ. JBL got his in a much intense and violent way compared to what he put Chris Jericho through, but hey, he won by DQ, so it is what it is. Okay, this match in my mind is low-key famous because it was one of the only bloody matches to come in HD. Match itself, as I said, it's nothing. The only reason I remember is because of the blood. Take away the blood, and I don't think I'd even remember a single thing about it. That's what makes this match a bit famous to me, and the action itself, like I said, it's just forgettable. With that said, Jericho was more than happy to discover this newfound side to him. It was clear that this was far from over, and that aggression did not lead to victory for him later that night. Nonetheless, they did eventually face off in a normal match ahead of No Way Out. Solid action, but it lacked that fury that the feud itself delivered. He did this once again in the chamber to basically end the feud on top. Very disappointing. The thing with the matches is, JBL was kind of rusty. Add to that, Jericho had only returned, and I'll get into that later. For now, let's focus on Jericho's story. Following No Way Out, Y2J looked elsewhere. He looked to the Money in the Bank briefcase. He beat Jeff Hardy to qualify for the match, and what this meant was he was in Money in the Bank, and 2, he put his name in contention for Hardy's Intercontinental Championship. He invited Hardy to the highlight reel, and Jericho indirectly rubbed that win into Hardy's face and proclaimed himself to be the victor at WrestleMania. Jeff believed otherwise, so Y2J reminded him that he actually won the title and didn't want to be buddy-buddy with Jeff for the moment. He agreed, and so he hit a twist of fate. As a result of this, Jeff Hardy had to defend the Intercontinental Championship the following week. If you knew, you knew that Hardy got caught at the time. He violated the wellness policy at the worst possible moment. Because of this, he lost the title. Nevertheless, this was a good-ass match. Easily the best for me up to this point. I enjoyed this match a lot watching it a while ago. But I remember really liking it at the time. It was full of counters, exciting action. The crowd was into it. Near falls, all that. It ended with Chris Jericho pinning Hardy after a code breaker to become an 8-time champion. Jericho beat his own record. Other than this, though, he got punked out by the Big Show, who was facing the $20 million man. And so it's clear that he had to look good ahead of that match. Y2J disqualified himself and ran into a knockout blow that Big Show developed in his time away. Following this, Jericho failed to win Money in the Bank, and at this point, he was in the same position as he was before leaving in 2005. The problem now is that the momentum that was brought forth with his return was gone. The other men were just doing more notable work around here. His feud with JBL was just on paper, it's supposed to be this big blood feud that ends with Jericho's hand in the air and JBL on the mat, a bloody heap. But it wasn't even close to that. It felt rushed, their matches weren't notable, and it also didn't help that they started the feud at Armageddon. The feud cooled down quickly before the Rumble match. Both men needed somebody else for the moment, and it didn't click, unfortunately. Following that, Jericho was just a good hand. He was featured in the Chamber match, and he was having good performances, but it was clear that they weren't going to push him higher if he continued to be the same person. So we all know what happened in the next couple of months. Alright, as I said, this return, it cooled off quickly. Jericho was just another guy on the roster after a few weeks. But there was some cool moments here. His return promo. I liked the Me-Want title match thing. I thought it was kind of funny. But a lot of stuff he did here was mostly forgettable. Once again, I'll be back with a HBK and Chris Jericho feud video. I'm going to start with Shawn Michaels and Batista. It's going to slowly transition into that, and I'm probably going to do it all in one video. Alright, what do you guys think of Chris Jericho's 2007 WWE return? Please comment down below, and that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the walls of Jericho on the like button, or perhaps the code breaker on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.